We've consistently proposed long-term partnerships, while America has often pursued short-term transactions. The gap between partnership and competitor, unfortunately, has remained too wide in recent days. So last evening, I instructed our negotiators to return to Ottawa. We cannot accept what they've offered, and we will not give what they've asked.
The United States and Canada are two of the world's most closely connected economies, but that relationship is now facing a serious new test. The Trump administration has imposed additional tariffs of up to 50% on specified Canadian goods, while Canada is preparing countermeasures of its own. At the heart of the confrontation are automobiles, steel, aluminium, energy, critical minerals, and increasingly the question of how much economic pressure one country can put on the other. So how did the relationship between two major trading partners reach this point? Let's start with what happened. On 22nd August, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said that Canada was walking away from a trade deal with Washington because the terms on the table were unacceptable. Carney argued that the United States was seeking conditions that would fundamentally alter the relationship between the two countries. He also said Canada will not accept an arrangement in which it is treated as subordinate to the United States. That is significant because Canada and the US do not simply trade with each other. Their economies are deeply integrated. Nowhere is that clearer than in the automobile industry. Vehicles and components routinely move across the border as part of a single North American production system. So a tariff imposed on Canadian auto production does not necessarily stop at the Canadian border. It can raise costs across the wider supply chain, including for American manufacturers, workers, and consumers. And that is why the auto sector has become one of the most sensitive parts of this dispute. The Trump administration has also targeted Canadian steel and aluminium. The White House has separately maintained a 50% tariff regime on steel and aluminium imports, citing US national security concerns. And in July, the administration announced additional 50% Section 338 tariffs on specified Canadian products, arguing that Canada had discriminated against American commerce. Those measures took effect on 19th August. Canada has rejected the American justification and is preparing retaliation. Prime Minister Carney has said that Canada will respond with its own measures targeting selected American goods. But Ottawa is also facing a larger strategic question. How do you retaliate against the United States without damaging your own economy? Because Canada is highly dependent on access to the American market, and that is where the threat of a prolonged trade war becomes particularly serious. Canadian provinces could potentially use some of their own economic leverage as well. Ontario exports electricity to the United States, while Canada is also an important source of minerals that are strategically significant to American manufacturing and national security. But using those supplies as leverage would carry risk for both sides. And that brings us to the bigger issue. This confrontation is increasingly about more than the tariff rate on particular products. It is about the structure of the US-Canada economic relationship itself. Carney has argued that the old model in which Canada would rely on stable and predictable access to the American market has changed. The Canadian government is therefore talking increasingly about diversification, building stronger economic relationship beyond the United States and reducing Canada's dependence on a single trading partner. For Washington, the argument is different. The Trump administration says the tariffs are intended to address what it considers unfair or discriminatory treatment of American commerce and to protect US economic interest. So both governments are presenting the dispute as a matter of national interest, and that makes a quick resolution more difficult. And the consequences could extend well beyond government negotiating rooms. If tariffs remain in place, businesses face higher cost. Supply chains could be disrupted, manufacturers could reconsider where they produce goods, and consumers on both sides of the border could ultimately feel the effect. For Canada, the challenge is to push back without making its own economy more vulnerable. For the United States, the challenge is that American industries are also deeply connected to Canadian supply chains. So the longer this confrontation continues, the harder it becomes to isolate the economic consequences to just one side. For now, neither government appears ready to back down. Washington is using tariffs as leverage. Ottawa is preparing retaliation and looking for alternative trading partners. And the auto, steel, energy and critical minerals sectors are all caught in the middle. What began as a trade dispute is therefore becoming a much broader test of the US-Canada relationship. And the question now is not simply who can impose the bigger tariff. It is how much economic pain each side is willing to absorb before the two governments decide that returning to the negotiating table is preferable to escalating the fight.